When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Well, we don't know when that roll call is going to take place, but we know that it's going to take place. And we know that we need to be ready to answer to our name. You know, makes me think of conference. That's about the only place that I know that roll call. And some places, I guess, they go by alphabetical order. Some places they go by seniority. I don't know how it's going to be when we get to heaven, but I sure hope that I know I'm going to answer to my name when my name is called up yonder. That makes me think of that song, if I get it together now. Someday, what's that now? Someday they'll call my name, I believe it is. Huh? One day, yes. One day they're going to call my name. And I don't know what day that's going to be, but I certainly want to be ready when my name is called. We welcome everyone to the service this morning. It's good to see everyone out here on this winter morning. But just hang in there. Spring's coming. It's going to take maybe a couple weeks yet, but it's coming, and we'll enjoy it better when it comes then, of course. But this morning when Dennis had the devotions, he thought he might be stepping a little bit into my territory. But I kind of chose, Valentine's Day is on Friday, if I remember correctly. So I kind of decided I'm going to preach to you on Valentine's Day. No, I mean preach to you after Valentine's Day. Maybe you take what you heard this morning, and then I'm not sure what the Lord's going to bring yet for next Sunday morning, but I expect to maybe have some kind of a sermon on that subject next Sunday. Depends how the Lord leads here. As I was getting ready for this sermon this morning, when I sat down at my desk and was thinking about this and started preparing, I thought this morning we're going to wrap up on Joseph, but I ain't going to guarantee it. It might not, the more I read, the more I thought of things that I should probably bring. So either if we get done, it might be lengthy. And if we don't get done, there'll be another one coming later. But as we think of Joseph, and we think of faith, and we think of how God worked in the life of Joseph, and in the whole family of Jacob there, the Israelites, God's plan, and the more I studied, and the more if you didn't get much out of the scriptures here on Joseph, the messages, I pity you. I sure did. I sure did. And so many times, we go over these scriptures, and maybe we read a portion, and there's something we never saw before, and it takes on a new light, and it just speaks to us in an altogether different way than what maybe we thought of it before. But as we think of Joseph and Jacob here and the Israelites, and of course, last week we were there in chapter 46, where Jacob moves down to Egypt, and I think we left off somewhere there where he offered a sacrifice there at Bethel to the Lord, and the Lord met him there. And how that the Lord gave him reassurance there in meeting him there, where where when he took his journey, and how that in Beersheba, I should say, not in Bethel, but in Beersheba, and how he offered an offering there, and the Lord met him there, and the Lord said, it's okay to go down there to Egypt. I'll be with you. I'll go with you down there, and I'll be with you, and I'll bring you out of there again. And of course, we find that Jacob takes his family, and they're on their way, and they go down into to Egypt, and then that brings. But one thought I want to bring on here before I move on here. There in chapter 45 and verse 10, Joseph says there to his brothers, when he sends for Jacob there, he says, and thou shalt dwell. Talking to his brothers. He says, haste ye, verse 9, haste ye and go up to my father and say unto him, thus says thy son Joseph, God has made me Lord over all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, and thou and thy children, thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. He says here, he tells his brothers, his brethren, that they're going to dwell in the land of Goshen. Now Goshen, of course, if I don't, maybe that's not pronounced exactly right, but it's the best land that was down there in Egypt. And isn't that just how it is when we come to Christ? He doesn't give us second best. He gives us the best. And that's just, so now we start off here now where Jacob comes down there to Egypt. And it says that, let me get my thoughts here together. He comes down there to Egypt, and as he comes there to Egypt, there in verse 28 of chapter 46, he says, and he sent. Now it would be Jacob. Now this wagon train is coming with all that was up there in Canaan. The sons, their wives, and their children, their cattle, and I'm thinking Jacob. He had a lot of cattle. You know, he was a good herdsman. Because when he was there serving for his wife there with Laban, why he served them years for Rachel. And then he was deceived and ended up with Leah. And then, of course, then he served some more years for Rachel. And all the time that he was there, he was a herdman of Laban's cattle. And when Laban would pull a trick on him, you know, there were two tricksters working there together. But that's not in my sermon this morning. But he was a great herdsman. He knew how to work things in his favor, and it worked for him every time. And God just blessed him in a very special way. As I thought of this yesterday, I thought, I believe Jacob was probably the best herdsman there ever was. I didn't get no amen on that, but that's all right. I didn't expect any either, so, as far as that goes. But, the way that God worked there with Jacob. Now he comes down there to Egypt. And now as he comes down there to Egypt, and it says, and he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Now, there in verse, then from verse 29 of that chapter to the end of that chapter, we have there where Jacob and Joseph meet each other. Now listen here. It says, and Joseph made ready his chariot and went out to meet Israel, his father, to Goshen, and presented himself unto him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck. How long?
A good while.
A good while. All these years that Jacob thought Joseph was dead, and all these years Joseph is down there in Egypt, wondering if his dad is still alive. The only communication they really had was when his brothers came down there. Think of this. Now, the first time that Jacob sent his sons down there to get corn, to get grain, and his son and Joseph's brothers come down there. And what's the first thing, one of the first things, maybe not the first thing, but one of the first things that Joseph asked his brothers, is your dad still alive? He doesn't say, is my dad still alive? Even though that's really what I wanted to know. But he says, is your dad still alive? How many times do you think that Joseph thought, well, is my dad still living? The newspapers didn't come with the obituaries in there because there weren't any that I would think of them. But here they meet each other after all these years. And they wept a good while. And it says, and Israel said unto Joseph, let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. Now here Joseph meets his dad. His dad says, after he meets Joseph, now let me die. You know, it reminded me of, his name just slipped my mind. Simeon, when he took up the Christ child in his arms, Simeon looked for the Christ child so long that when he finally saw the Christ child, he says, now lettest thy servant depart in peace. Now when Jacob saw Joseph, that he was yet alive, what a burden was lifted. And he said, now let me die. I'm ready to die. But God wasn't ready yet. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, my brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade has been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. They came. They finally arrived. Pharaoh said to Joseph earlier, send them, go and get wagons, go get them, bring them down here. When he said unto his brothers, there's yet 5 years of famine. Now, this is what goes on here. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, now Joseph is saying this to his brethren, and it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, that ye shall say, what is your occupation? And ye shall say, thy servants' trade hath been about cattle. From our youth even unto now, both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, and for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Here, God is using a plan to keep the Israelites not altogether away from the Egyptians, but to cause some distance, that they maybe don't intermingle so much. I don't know. But he says, when Pharaoh asks you, you tell him that this is your trade. This is all we know. So the time comes when Jacob is presented to Pharaoh. And what do you think he asked? There in verse 3, and Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we're shepherds. We're cattlemen. And said moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land we are come, for thy servants have no pasture, and their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee, and for the land of Egypt is before thee, in the best of the land, that make thy father, thy brethren, to dwell in the land of Goshen. Then let them dwell, and if thou knowest any man of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. See here how things work. God sent Joseph down there, and he got everything set up. Now his family comes down there, and right away his brethren are supposed to take care of Pharaoh's cattle. Now, as I thought about this, now, almost everybody here knows that if it doesn't rain for a while, the pastures dry up. Doesn't take very long. And here they were back in the land of Canaan. And you know what happens if you have a herd of cattle or sheep or whatever, a flock or whatever, and there isn't much there to eat. After a bit, you can see at the cattle that they're not getting enough. And then after a bit, you can maybe see the rips a little. You don't see the rips, but you can almost tell where they are because they're not filled out. Now, here they come down there to Egypt. And down there in Egypt, there's plenty of rain, plenty of green grass, plenty of pasture. And these cattle, you know, when you turn cattle out into a new pasture where there's a lot of green grass and a lot of good eating, why, they just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. You think they'll never get done. And after a bit, they start filling out. And after a bit, they start getting fleshy. And after a bit, they start getting looking beautiful. Maybe not in your eyes, but in an old farmer's eyes, they do. You know, you can almost probably, I can almost see these animals gaining weight when they get down there into Egypt. You know, sometimes when you're at an auction and they bring some cattle through the auction ring that don't have too much to eat, and you can see that they need some good refreshments. And when you get to a place where there's plenty to eat, why it seems they just eat and they eat and they eat. And I believe this is what these cattle did. They just ate and they just got better looking all the time. You know, God just had the best for them. And Joseph brought Jacob, so they were brought into the land there of Goshen, and then they were even supposed to take care of Pharaoh's cattle, and And God just blessed Pharaoh for Joseph's sake in a very special way. But it says, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from Pharaoh. Now, Joseph here provides for his father and his brethren. In chapter 47 and verse 11 it says, and Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Remenes, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. Here Joseph takes care of his father. You know, his father nourished him when he couldn't help himself. But now here is Jacob. He's up in years. His eyes dim. He's not able to get around very well. But Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his household, his father's household, with bread according to their families. He took care of them. You know, that guy that had that dream, you remember? Remember the guy that said, you're going to bow down to me? And he got angry? Remember that? How many years ago was that? That'll never happen. But it happened. And now he's nourishing them. And there was no bread in the land, in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of their famine. This was a tremendous famine. It just lasted, and it lasted, and it lasted. And things got so bad that, it says that Joseph gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when money failed in the land of Egypt, now the money got all. You know, the food didn't get all in Egypt, but the money did. Well, then they started, the money failed. It says, and Joseph said, give your cattle. Then they started giving their cattle for something to eat. And then after a bit, they started giving their land. You know, we can't imagine what it would have been, what it was like to be down there in Egypt when they're in Canaan. There was nothing to eat, so they came down there. And when the money got all, then they were willing to give their cattle. When the cattle got all, they were willing to give their land. And when the land got all, they were willing to give themselves as slaves. That's how bad it was down there. Okay, we need to move on here. And then when we come over into chapter 48, Joseph visits Jacob. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon his bed. Just Jacob or Israel, Jacob heard that Joseph is coming to see him. And he was that weak. You might say he was bedfast. But when he heard that Joseph was coming, he got strength in himself, and he sat upon his bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will give of thee a multitude of people, and will give the land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting an everlasting possession, pardon me. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. Jacob here it says, these two grandsons that are these two sons that are yours, they're mine. He claims them for himself here. He says, they unto me are mine as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And thy issue, which shall begottest after them, shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of thy brethren in their inheritance. And as for me, when I came to Paran, Rachel died, the one that he loved the most. That don't sound good right before Valentine's Day. The one he loved the most died by me in the land of Canaan, in the way when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrata, and I buried her there in the way of Ephrata, the same is Bethlehem. Now, here Jacob is saying to Joseph, your mother died when we were still away, not back in Canaan yet, and I had to bury her there. That must have been a hard time for Jacob. I'm sure it was, just like it would be for anybody. And he reminds Joseph about this. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, who are these? Now remember, his eyes are dim. And Joseph said unto his father, they're my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had no thought to see thy face. He's saying, I thought I'd never see your face again. And lo, God has showed me also thy seed. Now what did Joseph say when his first son was born? This ain't word for word because I didn't go back and look it up. But he said that God gave me a son so that I might forget the things of the past. And then he gave him another son. And now here Jacob says to Joseph, I had not thought that to see thy face, and God has showed me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands willingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my father Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God who fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name be named on, pardon me, and the name be named on them, in the name of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And behold, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly the younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, In this shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again into the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with the sword and with the bow. Here we see where Jacob was dying, getting about at the end of his life. And here's Joseph with his two sons, which Jacob wasn't aware of. But when the time came for him to give a blessing to Joseph, he also gave a blessing to his 2 sons. And Joseph thought that Manasseh, the older one, should have had the greater blessing. But God saw it differently. You know, and Joseph tried to move their hands around. But Jacob said, not so. I know what I'm doing. And God always knows what he's doing. And I'm going to come to a close because I won't be able to get finished this morning. But again, we can see here how God appeared to Jacob when he was going on his way down there to Egypt. And God said, I'll go with you down there. And I'll be with you down there. But you're going to come out of there again. And when we think, I think I might have mentioned it last week that there was about 66 or somewhere between 66 and people that left Canaan and went down into Egypt. And then when you take Joseph and his family, that's up to about 70 that went down into Egypt. And then when you go into the book of Exodus, and when God used Moses to bring the children of Israel out, God said, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. And just think how they multiplied over those years. God had a plan, and God has a plan. And God has a plan for each and every one of us. It's just that we need to be faithful in doing that which he has for us to do. Let's stand together for the closing prayer and benediction.